In this week's pod, we were joined by Ellen Mellington to discuss streamlining operations with Agile Controls, the key to business as usual performance. As a transformation and governance leader, Ellen has delivered change portfolios and major projects in transport, healthcare, and the environmental sector. Having direct exposure to the challenges faced financially, culturally, and commercially in delivering public services, she has applied the right blend of governance and controls to achieve integration and collaboration. The aspect that she enjoys the most is supporting businesses to design successful operating models by connecting the dots between people, process, organization, and technology. Well, Joe, that was a fascinating episode. We didn't talk once about Scrum. So what were your thoughts on today's episode?
Yeah, I was definitely expecting a few sprints and a few scrums and just the terminology that you hear quite often about Agile. And so it was quite nice that she took a much broader view and just this concept of integration at the full business enterprise level, allowing you to really do that shifting between, I think at the moment, given the climate emergency and given where we're heading, we really do need to be taking that full enterprise level when we think about which projects are worth delivering and what can we do more within the business as usual world. And I really like the concept of managing the variance, so utilizing project management skills where they're potentially helpful, especially as data analytics and project analytics become more and more better, I suppose. I'm trying to think of a better word than that, but better, and improved. I think that idea of managing performance, etc., becomes then quite interesting. And I'm still left questioning, how does this change occur? And actually, in some respects, isn't it already happened? And it's kind of crazy to think this isn't how we manage our businesses and how we operate them. So to get that insight that that's not how it's running is a bit of a moment.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of sense spoken during it, and she really talked about future-proofing of projects and how some of the concepts are applicable to all industries and all types of projects, which was interesting. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll let the listeners make their minds up about Agile, and hopefully they'll have the same views as ourselves. Thanks a lot, Joe, for stepping in for Dale and Val today. That was really helpful, and hopefully you enjoyed it. So we'll leave it there, and thanks a lot.
We understand construction. I think how we can help is identifying that risk up front and enabling the transparency that our tools bring to the table.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's always great to have you with us. Both Dale and Val are away on holiday this week, so we're joined by a very special guest who is admirably stepping in to be co-host, Joe Lucas. Joe, how are you?
Good to be here. Can't think of anything better to do.
Brilliant. I think this is your third time now, is it?
Yeah, I'm getting to be, a bit of an expert at this one.
Yeah, you'll be replacing us all soon. You'll have your own show and be far better than Project Chatter. We're joined this week by Ellen Mellington, who is going to talk to us about Agile Controls and business as usual performance. Ellen, welcome to the podcast.
Hello,
how are you today?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. As we said at the our little bit of a getting to know you session, tiny bit nervous. I haven't done a podcast before, but it's a chat, isn't it? So I had some ideas on some things that I thought would be useful to validate with peers, and then obviously whatever feedback we get from our audience. So I'm good to go, I think.
Brilliant. Well, in usual Val fashion, if you could tell us a little bit about your career journey to date and a little bit about the subject.
Yeah, sure. So I'll say let's personalize it a bit. So who am I? So I'm Ellen Mellington. I am a project I like to label myself as a transformation and governance professional, because I help organizations change the way that they're doing things, not in small stages, although you need to do it small first, build up and then achieve the big stuff, but transform the way that they believe in themselves and the things that they do through their processes, people and technology. But you can't do that without a governance layer. So my history has been a role of project delivery, transformation roles and governance roles. So what you might call like head of PMO roles as well. But in those roles themselves, it is all purely about transforming the way that we do things through having a a little bit of order or control to the way in which we do things, and that's been primarily in I say transport because I started off in coaches. That was an operational role, but actually wasn't. So from day one, it was embedding a new team, thinking of a new operating model. So it's always been from day one, how do we change to do things differently and better for our customers? Transport for London Underground mostly, new trains, new signalling, fantastic like contractors, teams, builders, or everybody working together, what one great team. And then delved into the world of consulting. To be honest, in the consulting world, up until my current role, it's been embedded directly into a client, so I've very much got that client head of deliver the right thing for your customer. Try not to go native, but you always do, because it's about kind of, there's no badge, we're all just in it together, delivering great work. But my new role is actually with that consulting hat, and that's quite interesting because, to be honest, as the reality is, if clients want work done, they need a supply chain that can keep itself afloat. So it's quite interesting learning about how those suppliers keep themselves afloat as well. And a lot of the project controls organisations, because they're deemed as being temporary, have to come from consultants and third parties. And so we need to recognise that as clients, if you want a really good colleague and collaborator, that partnership is really important. It's less about client supplier, it's partnership working and really integrating those skill sets together. It's probably a very long intro, but that's and I'm from Birmingham, so my accent might show that at certain points in time.
Brilliant, great intro there. Thanks a lot for that. So if we move to the theme of the podcast, so Agile Controls, for the uninitiated among us and the Agile skeptics, as Joe secretly told me before we started, what are Agile Controls and how do they work on projects?
Well, may I go back one step? Sorry, Martin. I just want to be so just to from a project chatter community perspective, because it's really good to understand my audience in this current sphere and who might be listening. There's listeners out there. What are the general expectations of project chatter? What do people want to get from this? What would you as Martin want to get from it, or you, Joe? And what do you think that what's the overarching intent of project chatter?
So I think the overall aim of project chatter is about sharing knowledge as a project management community. We've got quite a diverse range of guests, some of whom have been working in the industry for 20 years. We had Shane Forth on a couple of weeks ago, 40 years experience. Some who are just slightly interested in controls, and we have people from all around the world who are interested. So maybe some kind of baseline definitions, let's say, and then cool. As we move on, we can kind of Joe and I can use our own experience to hopefully try and challenge and debate some of what you're talking about. So yeah.
Well, that sounds good, because I think what I wanted to get from it was just, I've been working in the you get academics who write tons of stuff. That's not agile in my view. So there's a little bit of, so the agility is going to be a bit of a flavour in this. And what do we mean by agile? So we mean wanted to achieve an outcome, but we're not quite sure how we're going to get there. But we know we need to start, and we need to sense check where we're going on a regular enough basis to know that we're going to achieve that outcome. So what would I like to achieve from this session is to try and convince clients that controls are non-optional, they are essential. So the way you run your BAU organisation needs a degree of control. It needs a P3O organisation. It's not just about major projects. It's not just about what you deem as being significant change. Organisations, by day are changing, basically. Your performance varies day by day. It is BAU. So that's what I would like to convince people of, and then get your view, Martin and Joe, and anybody else who wanted to kind of add comments or discuss this further after, is why we think that hasn't quite landed. Because the whole concept of enterprise PMO and the benefit of agility, because every organisation, DFT, are all talking about agility. Network Rail has moved from grip to pace and speed. Everybody knows you don't need to know everything on day one to deliver the change that you need. But that's about building trust. So I think what I'd like to get at the outcome is just a little bit of advocacy or validation as to whether I'm not crazy to think what I do. But I can go into the title now, unless you wanted to kind of come back on that first.
Well, no, I'd be interested in talking about that, because when I say like skeptical, I think for me I think it's where you're talking about the academic layer that's been put onto Agile, because I hear what you're saying about the how, and a lot of my work sits in this concept of constant evolution and supporting that constant evolution. So it's quite refreshing to hear Agile spoken of in those terms. And so for me, like, how much of the way that you perceive Agile comes from its basis as an IT concept that was very closed system, etc. Yeah, and has been transferred across. And how much is you're using the terminology of Agile and the basic intent of Agile, but you're making it work for the construction industry?
Yeah, well, and so I'd qualify not construction in any industry.
Any industry,
people everywhere, anybody, from the charity to the financial institution to the governance model, like everybody, I think is. But agility is exactly the dictionary definition. Let's be adaptive and be flexible in the way that we think about things. In the IT world, because it's epics, stories, requirements that are not prescriptive, but you still need to know where you're going. So it's very much in the. Let me think. Look, I'm just going to look back for a moment, and I know we've got a little bit of time to talk if we need to. Let's think about waterfall. Why waterfall? Waterfall is because people want certainty around cost. So they want to have very prescriptive requirements because they can fix the cost. And they want to know exactly what that is up front, and then be able to have clarity within their designer. This is and then buy in a builder who is deemed to be maybe not lesser skill, but different skill, who will literally build what that design says. How does that work in practice? I'm going to open that up. Do we not get any scope variance? Do we not have the builder that could have some more innovative ideas? Do we not have a builder that needs to validate what that design is, or that the design changes throughout the building process? I don't know, Martin, Joe, what do you think?
I mean, from my own experience, yeah, the design changes throughout the life cycle of the project, and that can lead to a different kind of scope to what you were doing when you first set out. Joe, how about you? What's your experience?
Well, I mean, it always evolves, and it's never what you expected in the first place.
Exactly.
And the more that we build, and more that we're building in the current uncertainty that we have at the moment, the less chance we have of getting the scope right up the front, and that causes huge amounts of problems in all of our projects. My question is, why Agile and not another approach? Like, why has Agile become the thing that we utilize for that circumstance, as opposed to other ways of dealing with that? What are the options?
I guess I'm less familiar on what all of those options are. But if we go back to why I think Agile Controls is better than Waterfall Controls,
Yes.
And let's go back to the specific kind of topic. It's around so operational inefficiency. Where does that come from? Do we know what that operational efficiency? If you took in project world just for a second, and then I'll bring it back to the actual title of the talk. You can limit innovation by not being willing to change. Now, waterfall kind of limits the ability to change because everything's tied in contractually. There's a couple of things there. You could look at contractual mechanism to be a bit more flexible, but actually you're very rigid in the sense we've done design, we can't do design again. We're doing build now, we're not going to look back, we're not going to evolve. Delay happens. Delay means a lot of projects are not future proofed because the technology, to be honest, is old by the time the things have been implemented and time has moved on, and you get assets that are introduced that then need to have a new project come along because you're out of date. So there's lots of reasons or discussion as to why waterfall might be too rigid. I'm not sure what all of there's going to be a balance, there's going to be a hybrid. I think the key thing about the discussion today is, do you know how we help those decisions get made? Is we take the dialogue from down at major project level or major program level, down at a siloed level, like up from a siloed level within an organization to the enterprise level. And that's what I mean by agile controls to support kind of operational efficiency or make it BAU, is you bring those controls up to C-suite level, up to enterprise level within an organization. Because P3O, what does it mean? Portfolio, which is your whole portfolio. It literally means enterprise. Program, project. How many portfolio offices are there? Not that many. A lot more than there have been. And new organisations, East West Rail, for example, are looking at enterprise P3O. There's a movement within Great British Railway and organisations like that to look to apply system thinking. You've got, I think it's called Project 13 and other like DFT initiatives. But system thinking isn't new. It's been around for years. Engineers have always been talking system thinking. Yet how often do we see that embedded? We don't. We see, I don't want to cite that many examples, and then I'll go into kind of some of what I wanted to talk about. But you have major programs like new train introduction, new signalling systems. Now, how often do they get accepted into operations at the time or at the cost that they were supposed to? They don't, because the sponsorship is not at enterprise level and the operators are brought in at the end of the day. Crossrail is a prime example. An organisation delivered on its contract, but it yet didn't achieve its goal because the operator and the assurance wasn't part of the process, because it's not done at enterprise level. It's CapEx, major contracts. We love to buy things. We buy major contracts. And we deliver them to the point in time when that one contractor has delivered what they need to do, or like principal with their subbies. But it's actually an organisation that requires the change. It's an organisation that buys that. It's a finance director that authorises it. It's not the programme director delivering in silo. However, that's how it happens. So let me just, because I'm going to go off on a bit of a rant. I just want to maybe... it'd be really good to get your qualification on this, if I may. So what do I mean by controls? So the agile bit is about being adaptive, but I just want to think about what do we mean by control. So my interpretation of controls is, well, actually, you've got you've got an APM definition somewhere down here that I captured earlier. It's like it's an organisation that helps. So a PMO controls is an organisation that helps deliver program projects and portfolios. But what's the purpose of those projects, programs and portfolios? It's to deliver change. So actually it's all about change management. That's the entirety of what we're trying to look at. So if we think about why that needs to be on an enterprise level, it's because your whole organisation needs to change, isn't it? The whole simple thing, managing successful programs. People, process, organisation, technology, information. You cannot look at those things in silos in order to deliver change. Yet, we're not helping ourselves. As a PPM community, we create those silos. Therefore, it's not surprising that our clients procure it in silos, because we sell ourselves in silos. We champion ourselves in silos. Change management, SIG, specialist interest group over here. Project control, special interest group. Project managers somewhere else. Programming, MSP. And let's not forget the data and analytics, which is key to all of it. So let me. What do you want to come back on that? Any? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So if you're going to, so we come back into, say, Crossrail, where you're saying that this should be dealt with at an enterprise level, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think Mark Wilde advocates that as well, like get the PMO in at C-suite level. Yeah.
But who would you consider to have been the enterprise level on something like Crossrail, which is a combination of projects coming together? Because I think sometimes there's a certain level of, even though that there's Transport for London that it was going to have to connect into, there's politics at play that kind of causes that to be quite a difficult aspect. So when you think about those major projects and you think about bringing it up to enterprise level, where does that sit in your head? And my second question is, how do you tie that to Agile?
Okay, so where does that enterprise? Yeah, that's really important. What is that enterprise entity? Now, this is about a change to an organisation, isn't it? So therefore, you need a change organisation set up specifically to do that. Now, if you have a number of stakeholders and they are Crossrail Limited, Network Rail, Transport for London, let's take like GBR as an example. So you've got Rail Delivery Group, Network Rail. You have a rail. Basically, they've done it in the right way as it stands at the moment. Proof is in the pudding. Great British Railway Transition Team. So you have a transition team that is set up specifically. That is your change organisation. That is your PMO, your program specialist, your project, your change, your communication, everything within your P3O model, all in a transition team, which is a temporary structure required to deliver a change. Now, the key thing is, once GBR gets into fruition, or once Crossrail was delivered, that shouldn't just disappear because you've delivered the change. Because the key message that I have is, change is happening on a day-to-day. You will always have timetable change. You're manufacturing something, you'll always have variance. So don't make it just the major things. Don't have it just the mobilisation. Because like another thing where it works well, in answer to that first question, what are the cross-party, multi-stakeholder entities? Mobilisation of a franchise. You get a specific organisation set up. Avanti, that's the name of it, yeah. Avanti mobilisation. Or let's talk about something I was specifically involved in. Govia Thameslink Railway mobilisation. We had people from the former like London Midland, we had former Thameslink, we had Southern, we had South Eastern, we had a whole group of people, people from the top world, people from the consultancy world, but you all had the badge of, what are we here to do? We're here to mobilise. Then what happened when the franchise started is there was a team of people that did the transition from the launch of that new state. So where are we? Where does it need to go to? You launch that and then you bed that in and you create. And actually what was established in GTR was a portfolio office to manage the business as usual change that happens within that organisation. So that's actually a good example of something where the right processes were considered. You don't see that everywhere. And I think it's about trying to think about, is it limitation of investment? Is it limitation of understanding about the benefits of it? Well, that's what I'm here to kind of figure out. Now, the agile side of it is, what do we know? We know that performance, and I'll talk about what I mean by performance in a minute. Performance on a day-to-day is going to change. That performance change is known. So therefore, there's always a need to have some change management function, some change management office. That change is key to the success of any business, charity, third sector, local government, blah, blah, blah. What's the agile bit? The agile bit is, how do we resolve that change? So we're targeting performance. The change is a variance against that performance metric. Performance improvement plans, continuous improvement, are how we maintain that right level of performance or exceed it. So by always considering our performance objectives. So the agile nature is, we don't know yet what the sources of variance are because they're not the same every day. I do have a little bit of skepticism around that, because I think if we had that would be another podcast for somebody much more au fait with the data than me. I think there's too much data there for people to see what the trends are, and I do struggle to believe that there is no pattern. It's like every day is a new day on the railway, or every day is a new day in a manufacturing plant. It's there must be some themes, but I think sometimes the data, that's another thing I think we can do as a whole industry is bring the data analytics into our into the same work stream as change and project management, rather than having it as silos. But basically, if you're looking at your day-to-day variance of an organisation, you need some kind of light touch, some streamlined PMO. So, and what that would look like, let me just go to that in a minute, is you need to know what your baseline is, don't you? So you need to know your scope, your time, how much your cost is, so what your annual budget is. Let's talk about a year. In a year, it might be too long for some organisation. Let's go with it. We're going to go with it. In a year, so top train operating company world, you have an annual business plan. Every year you need to reforecast, but you need to measure your success on that year. I'd say most operational organisations need to do that. More capex focused organisations, Network Rail, they've obviously got control periods, which are 5 years. Transport for London operates on I think it's 5 years, but it's a much larger scale, which, to be honest, allows major investment in huge pieces of work. So there's obviously another topic around investment periods and whether a year is enough. But let's just take the view that in your year, you want to baseline at the beginning of that year, or be ready for the start of that financial year, what your scope is, how much time you have to deliver things, how much those things are going to cost, what the quality is, and what the risk is around that. That's, as an organisation, that is your business plan. How is that different from the start of a project or a programme? It's not, is it? That's your start of your business year. So why is it not BAU? Why are these, what's the difference between doing your annual business planning and having a PMO structure to help you do that, or having your project plan? And if you take it to the next level, how do you know if you varied from that plan? Well, you need some governance, don't you? So baseline monitoring, change control, what decisions do you get made about what's acceptable, what the thresholds are, what it's okay to change and what it isn't? Let's bring in some Lean Six Sigma people because we've got some variance. Assurance, quality assurance around that. Why keep buying it in just because things go wrong? Why not have it within your organisation? Risk. Well, yeah, you've set out what your risks are, but are you actually managing them or mitigating them? This is the bit that kind of touches on the, let's bring our friends from data analytics in there, because the analysis tells us whether we're doing well or not. Information management, that's a key part of project controls, PMO, isn't it? So what are the insights? Where are we going well? What are we doing differently? BAU teams on a day-to-day are having reports left, right and centre. Projects produce reports, programmes produce reports. Why is it deemed as a different, something different? It's not. It's all part of the same P3O piece. I separated analysis from reporting, because analysis, the insights, reporting is that whole barrage of data that we get. And as I mentioned, that's another hot topic for somewhere else, how you swim through that sea of data and actually find the life belt that you were looking for. Document control, knowledge management, digitizing information management. If I just break that down for a second, hold on, those three, just to be really clear on what I mean by controls, is you've got processes around baseline, you've got processes around governance, you have really good people, experts who do those things. If you make those things digital, you save time, and it's you have better integrity of data. So it's always going to be a partnership between project PMO professionals and their digital colleagues. So why don't we just call it all one space of integrated digital controls? I think that the dialogue is around trying to bring those special interest groups together to create an integrated offering across our community.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I'm just like trying to make sure I've got clear in my mind where you're
Yeah.
at. So basically, you're talking about treating business as usual and projects as a portfolio, and just see the fact that business as usual is actually a series of very small projects happening all the time that have all the same issues that the project has.
Indeed.
And we should deal with them together.
Yeah.
And that Agile is useful in helping this because it can cope with that sort of the constant variation.
Indeed.
Do you see any difference between, so one of the big things that normally kicks off a project is the fact that it either requires resources from across the industry, from across your organization in a different way. So you have to suddenly bring them into a temporary team. So there's that sort of element of something that wouldn't usually happen. And also often it's a finance. So you need to have a mass capital expenditure. And when you say I've got a mass capital expenditure, the banks kind of like you to be able to say with some certainty of how you're going to spend that. So how do you deal with the sense of course, there's lots of movement, but they want certainty?
Yeah. So I think the agility piece is use it. Well, what makes it agile? There's a degree of certainty that there will always be something that changes, but we don't know quite what that change is. Sometimes that change is catastrophic because we haven't been maintaining our assets. Now, if we maintain them on a regular basis and had that agile, that BAU PMO, we would probably be better able to know when your assets are going to fail, because that's part of the process, isn't it? Understanding your people, your processes, your technology, they're fit for purpose. Have we got the people we need to run our operation? Have we got the assets we need? Have we got, that investment? IT assets expire all the time. People can't invest in the right maintenance. We need to prioritize things. That what currently happens, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen it in Network Rail, I've seen it in Transport for London, I've seen it in healthcare and in the energy waste sectors. You wait for the thing to go wrong and then it's huge investment, rather than that continuous improvement of let's invest on a day-to-day basis and keep things moving. There's always going to be that major piece of investment, which, if you look at it from a risk management perspective, you've got an energy recovery plant and you've got major turbines that if something went wrong, that turbine's going to go out and you're going to lose the bottom out of your revenue. You need a contingency plan. So your contingency plan is, right, this is our interim. That needs to have some controls around it because that's a new way of working. That's a change. And then you've got the major change. So there's always BAU change, small to medium change, and then major transformation. When you have that dialogue around, my goodness, this huge turbine has suddenly gone, and that's a live experience of an organisation I was working in, it allows you to think about, do we just replace like for like, or do we do something different and we actually use this as a catapult to transform our organisation? If there's no mechanism in place for that dialogue, so actually let me open it up to the both of you. What dialogue is needed to answer that? You need robust risk management, don't you? You need an organisation in place to provide the right decisions. You need somebody who can do that cost management for you. You need to think about who your suppliers are, because it's actually not a big deal buying in resource from a third party if you've got a talent pipeline, a supply pipeline, and if you only ramp up your controls or PMO organisation. So let's just go back to the definition of what, because I talk about it as PMO. I know this project chatter is like project controls. For me, that's a little bit of a narrow lens. PMO is your organisation that helps you deliver change. Now, if you have to only bring that organisation in when you think you've got major change, it's too late, because who's been doing your proactive risk management? How do you respond quickly to something that actually was an unforeseen risk if you haven't got a pipeline of suppliers, frameworks in place to bring that in? But what do you think about that? Do you think I'm barking up the wrong wall, or does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense so far. It kind of leads me to my next question. What we spoke about for the last half an hour makes a lot of sense to me. you're going into a lot of businesses, and I imagine you must come up against some objections when you go in and you start talking about agile and improving processes. What are the major obstacles you face when you go into businesses? Why don't people want all this stuff? Because it seems a no-brainer. Why wouldn't any business want to think more strategically, optimize their processes, save money? Do people just get scared when you mention agile? Like, what are the biggest
I
challenges?
like when you said that, because it does seem to me like a no-brainer, but I was like, well, maybe I don't want to come into it thinking, why, how do we convince people this is the right thing? So hopefully, I think you two believe that it's the right thing to do. So what are the constraints that organisations have? One is that they are siloed, that you have structures in place that just create those silos in an organisation. So and again, open to any comments or whatever gets put on the YouTube or the LinkedIn when all of this gets shared. I'm just my phone keeps closing itself, but I think you can still hear me even though that happened. Yeah, sorry, my phone kept locking itself down. So it's that a CEO looks out to external stakeholders and shareholders. The COO looks into the operational part of the business. The chief engineer looks into the engineering. CIO is off in information. As I've already said, there is nobody bringing all of those entities together. A CEO, an MD, and I know from working in being close to these people in the railway and different sectors, is they have limited time to manage down within their organisation because they have shareholders, they have politicians, they have members of the public that they need to deal with. They need to be given the right information to be able to kind of give those right upward messages. Now, therefore, you need an entity within that organisation, hopefully somebody that supports either the CFO or the COO or even directly into the MD or CEO, who can be that glue, because that's the missing piece. So why does nobody want to buy this enterprise and agile way of doing things? Is agile, they think, is reactive. Oh, we are reacting on a day-to-day basis. That's great. We're really good at that. My Brummie accent came out quite strongly then. We're fantastic at reacting to things. It's what we do on a day-to-day. We're operators. That's great. And financial people say we're great at finding the money when we need to. Risk people we've got a whole list of risks. That's great. We're all but nobody really is measuring themselves on that. Integration, the system engineering piece, have we really demonstrated value? The reason why is because people haven't got the time or the resource to do it. Major organisations, let me think about the railway, train operating companies, an annual business plan, it's basically hand to mouth. So we as a group of subject matter experts, I think, have the role to play to help show our clients the better way of managing, improving performance in their organisations. Because how can you expect a train operating company with performance challenges, cost constraints, to be able to think strategically as well as tactically? What's the world of consultancy for, if not to be the strategic thinking for our clients? And I think that's I think we've covered most of the topics, but I wanted to say that's where I think we are letting ourselves down, because we are consultants typically offer siloed offerings. They compete with each other. You have operational consulting parts of a business fighting with PPM in order to win work. You have digital separate from PMO. What's really positive, I think, in the client space is they are now asking for, so Network Rail, a prime example of this, maybe because it's gearing up towards GBR, but also because it's arm's length part of DfT now, so it has to really account for its expenditure. Train operating companies now have a lot of DfT scrutiny, so that government oversight, I think, has made organisations think about what they're spending their money on, how to get the best out of their resources, invest in their people, is around really being able to show that they've thought about the controls, that they've selected the right projects that they're delivering, that they are buying in the right consultants. And part of their new tendering, a lot of the new pieces of work that are coming out are asking for outcomes-based pieces, not prescriptive client outputs that say we want you to put a red button here and deliver ABC. It's like we want this benefit for our organisation. Network Rail has done a number of tenders recently where it's outcome focused. East West Rail, all of these new organisations, DfT are asking for outcome focused pieces. The role of and they are basically saying, we want you as an industry to sort yourselves out, integrate together, show us the integrated offering, the pooling of your SME skills to help us deliver our outcomes. And I think that's fantastic. It gives us a real opportunity as those consultants to make controls, change management part of BAU, because we will really show the value. We'll show ourselves as being essential and non-optional. Probably gone on for far too long. I had some other maybe key points, but what other questions do we have before I run out of steam?
I mean, I'd be quite interested in what you'd see as being like one of the joys of being an SME and trying to change the way of thinking. So I work heavily in the systems approach, which isn't that far from what you're talking about.
I'm still there.
People want to have no. I was just sort of thinking about how to actually express it in terms of there's often they want to buy you for a piece of work. So it's nice that you're talking that there is a shift towards the outcome focused. How much, what do we need to change as an offering? Like you're saying that they need to change a different offering, but if you're going outcome focused and there's a chance that you may be running a project, but you also may actually say to them, you don't really need to do that project. What you should be doing is possibly just a bit of business as usual and make sure that you evolve some aspects of it and possibly you want to do this.
Yeah.
So what are you actually selling?
Look like, basically?
Yeah. Like what's in your head? What do you imagine this? Like, wouldn't it be amazing if?
Yeah. So what I'm selling is the idea that the best consultancies in the world do themselves out of a job for that particular job because they upskill the organization, they advise, which is what consulting is meant to be. Consulting isn't that you embed yourselves and then nobody can live without you, because you're not consulting, are you? It's like saying I need to keep going to the doctor all the time to feel well. Well, no, the doctor's meant to give you some medicine, aren't they? A prescription for how to live a better life and run a bit more and eat the right food. And that's actually what the recipe is. Actually take consulting back to what consulting is meant to be, and don't sell our clients a pup in the sense that we don't upskill, we don't knowledge transfer. But what does that mean, obviously, for continuity of service in a consulting world? It means change is happening all of the time. So the change that you help your organization deliver by being the advisor to the COO or the CEO to help them embed the right capability. Well, what are stage gates? What's assurance? What's quality review? What is independent assurance? That's you then going in, checking and challenging to say, that's great, we set you off on the right path. We're gonna, can we check and see if that worked well? Because we'd like to understand how we're doing, but also whether what we said made sense to you. And and if you need a little bit of help, and the model is that you become the trusted friend. So you're like the godparent, aren't you? That keeps going in, not the godfather, because that's got different connotations. You must work with us now, in the that sense of that continued oversight. Now, again, how does that continue how do we make that a continued journey? And this goes to the fact of the agile and what's the change that we don't know is coming, but that we need to then ramp up, scale up an organisation to deliver. I'm going to use one that's a bit more railway industry. Okay, there's always major programs. The NRC, National Rail Contract, gets written saying you're going to introduce new trains, you're going to build new stations. Let's say you got a run-of-the-mill is probably the wrong word. You've got an operator, a manufacturer, who is doing things day in, day out. They start to lose quality in their product. They don't know why. There's so many factors. Which one is it? This day that machine doesn't work. That day that person doesn't turn up. There's a whole number of reasons. What's the standard? What's the thing that's non-variable is that the outcome changes. So my curly whirly is not curly, it's straight. You've got your hodgepodge of chocolate coming out. There's a whole number of factors that a chocolate provider might have. So there's different solutions, aren't there, to that? So that might be a people change program, a process change program, technology change or asset change, building structure, because technology actually means you're building your workplace, everything that you have. Information, are people clear on what's being said? Have you got a new workforce where English isn't the first language? Do we need to think about the way in which we're communicating to our workforce? All of those things require I'd say an enterprise PMO structure to help figure out what that is through application of continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, your quality management. Before understanding, is it, and then using your business as usual people to say, they call it rapid action task force, don't they? Your rats go running out to figure things out. Quick, short, sharp. Going back to the word agile, sprints, 6 to 8 week sprints to say, what's actually our problem? What we know, we've got variance, that's great. We've measured it over 3-5 periods. We know that we can see that there's a problem in these areas. Get your business as usual people to spend that couple of weeks, bring in some third party suppliers. That's the continued work. Bring in your trusted people to do some innovation sprints, help you see the problem you can't solve yourself. And that's not saying that you're limited as an organisation. Everybody values peer review, don't they? I've been writing this Excel sheet and I can't even see the wood for the trees anymore. Can you look over my shoulder at this? That's literally what we're asking for, somebody to, and that has to that's got a cost to it. But if you do that for the right price, you get trusted to come in and do the bigger piece of work. And I think that's what I would hope, because I've very much got a client hat on, coming from supporting clients, but now I'm in the consulting world. It's the long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? So if you do that right piece of work, more comes from it. Why would we expect our clients to invest tons of money in us as external providers if we're not willing to invest a little bit ourselves and take that punt of going, we're going to do this at a valuable price for you because we know it's a long relationship. It's like that thing, isn't it? You're dating somebody, you buy that expensive bunch of flowers, but you know you're going to get something back. So it's kind of that long-term commitment. And I think just thinking about, so going back to the agile side of things and the scope, what are we looking for? What makes it BAU is performance improvement is what we're trying to, we're basically making P3O a performance management tool. Because if you think about it, I've got a diagram here. So our client functions in performance management. It's strategy and business planning. So what do they want? They want a clear, cohesive strategy that's continuously reviewed and refined. How is that different from outcome definition and business case development? It's the same. P3O people supporting a business as usual function. I'll just use another example, like performance analysis and reporting. You've got performance teams who are analysing on a day-to-day how you're doing, Power BI reports going, did we achieve the right output, didn't we? Did you achieve your on time to 3 if you're a railway? That's data and analysis insights as to how your project's performing. So again, we're mirroring project organisations, temporary organisations to permanent business functions. And then to the point, and maybe we close there because I'm getting quite tired, is performance improvement. Your business as usual teams they want to identify performance improvement, because if they don't, they will regress. You cannot stand still. You always have to move forward. So that's delivery, benefits and assurance. Again, it's a project organisation. You keep failing at the same thing and we can't achieve our targets. That could be very simple. Think about, if we look at national rail contracts, there are business planning commitments that might say, let's have a head of this department. Please employ a head of continuous improvement, because we recognise that continuous improvement is important. So that's a small scale change. Please bring in an auditor every 6 months. Again, small scale changes that need to be monitored and measured. But then it might be, well, your performance is failing on a day-to-day basis. Your trains obviously are not fit for purpose. Major programme, transformation, new train introduction. So that's when you have to say, well, we haven't got those resources ourselves. Buy in, temporary organisation. But yes, Jo, go on.
So what do you say to people who sort of say that, on the business as usual side, you normally have standard operating procedures, you often talk about process management. The whole point is to go from an ad hoc approach to things to trying to actually standardize, and then you're in the world of lean and automated and trying to gain efficiencies. Whereas in the project world, you have project management, agile, you're looking to be able to react to things that are happening. Are you saying that you can use just the agile process because things have become so disrupted within our organizations, as in change cycles are going much faster than they used to? You don't really have this stable standard operating procedure world anymore? Or are you saying actually it's a spectrum?
Yeah, I don't think you've ever had a standard operating procedure. Or let me think. In the railway, I'm going to use a specific example in the railway. So there is no baseline in the railway as it stands, and maybe it's because you have an industry that's going through so much change. National Health Service, you don't have a standard, you don't have a consistent quality of output on a day-to-day basis. It would be really good to see, maybe automotive, you get good quality every single day, 100% reliability. I doubt it though. You've probably got 98% where somebody's done the paintwork a little bit wrong. But let's scale it up. You have public services. So why is this important? Let's go. Let me think. Why is this important to me? Why do I think it's important to make performance management, make the case for having a structure, a control structure, a PMO structure, a change management organization as part of a BAU organization, not something you buy in as optional, something you have as essential. It's because there are core public services that we have, transport, healthcare, that are not able to achieve the quality that is expected of them on a day-to-day basis. Now, when you say, have we got standard operating procedures? Yes, we have. But do we know on the railway, have the business as usual team got time to manage the variance? They don't, because they are trying to maintain the day-to-day. Now, in maintaining the day-to-day, they're struggling to maintain the variance. What headspace do they have to then manage the continuous improvement alongside that? Now, there's been and I'll give a live example. There's been big investment because the Department for Transport recognises this, and there's been organisations, probably don't want to cite too many names, but a lovely train operating company I was working with recently had lots of heads of continuous improvement because they recognised the need to do that. Network Rail actually, and a really good colleague of mine, are leading the way to do lean learning academies. So they're spreading lean principles amongst their BAU people. Can those BAU people implement those skills that they've learnt? No, because they don't have the time to do it. Now, is their inability to find time going to be a permanent thing? No. Can consultants, through being the right people at the enterprise level, or not consultant, it's not about selling consultancy, it's about selling the idea. If you embedded a change management organisation at your enterprise at organisational level, because it's deemed important on a day-to-day, you can free up the time for those business as usual people to run their operations. You can't, it's very difficult to think tactically and strategically at the same time. Now you might ask, why did those heads of continuous improvement not be able to achieve what they intended to? Well, because we've had strike action, we've had resource shortages, so those heads of continuous improvement have been brought into BAU roles. So there's definitely a need for that little bit more of a buffer to help that continuous improvement, because I would applaud somebody who said that they'd made it work and that we're not unfortunately regressing rather than going forward. But I hope that answered that question, Joe, because I really tried.
It's an interesting concept that you're bringing the project management skills to manage the variance, as opposed to bringing the project management skills to manage business as usual. And I think that's a really clear Yeah, and I think that's a really important message to get across, because I've worked quite a lot on the operations side within Transport for London, etc. And if I dared to say as a project person I could run the business better than them, I'd get very short shrift. And I admire what they're doing to such an extent of it's completely outside my capabilities to do the things they do on a regular basis. So I like this distinction where you've created you're providing project management skill to cope with that variance, to give them the space to be able to do their job and take some of that weight off them. And that makes a lot of sense.
Indeed. And I think that's actually where I would position it. So we have, if you look at structures within an organization, they have what they call the core, don't they? So you have your C-suite, who are the so there's a couple of things maybe just that I'd like to make sure I mention before we finish. So one, you have the core thing, which is operations, and you have engineering that's deemed as core. Then you have your support systems. So you have your HR, you have your finance, you have your IT. So actually PMO, change management, I see as part of that support system.
So I think just to maybe anchor a couple of points. So one of the things was around, a key thing here was about making selling the view of enterprise P3O rather than the common model, which is you buy a PMO in to deliver major change. So it's actually that change management, that change control is much needed on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to kind of highlight what I mean by that. So operational performance. So what's an organization trying to do? So what does success look like? So the ability of an organization to achieve its performance, that's the products it produces, the goods it provides, the services and the software. And that's measured. So what does good look like? It's the expectation that a customer has. That's the voice of a customer, isn't it? But the ability of an organization to deliver on that is the capability of the process, so voice of the process. Now, anybody who knows about Lean Six Sigma and continuous improvement recognizes those concepts: voice of customer, voice of the process. So it's commonly understood that on a BAU organization, you buy in Lean Six Sigma and continuous improvement expertise. Why is it not viewed the same that you also need change management people within your organization, because you are going to deliver a significant piece of change at some point in time? Now, what's that linkage, and why do you not need why does that need to be scaled up? What's the agility? You don't always know what your performance improvement plan is going to be, but you will need to identify a performance improvement plan. And that's the scalability, that's the agile side. So do we need controls? Does an organization need to control its outputs on a day-to-day basis? Yes. Does it know how many people, what the processes are, what the technology is, what the information is, to be able to sustain that quality on a day-to-day? It sets out its vision, it sets out its goals. Actually, if we look at a governance organisation, you set up a new company, or any company, it has a board, doesn't it? That board is advisory. So that's like a steerco. You have it's an external body that provides some scrutiny and provides some steer. You have an exec level within an organisation that provides approval. You've got two missing pieces, haven't you? Where's your organisation that delivers the change on a day-to-day? Where's the organisation that controls that change on a day-to-day? Quite often they're missing. Then you go straight down to your business as usual teams who have to deliver that change on a day-to-day. They have to, they're not maintaining it, they're not controlling it, they're not capable of having the strategic oversight because they're so resource constrained.
Using your examples there.
Yeah.
How often would a typical business like that look at their resourcing requirements?
They look at
for their BAU teams and generally. So, if you're looking at you used the 1 year horizon earlier, how often would they look at those, your kind of supply versus demand type reviews and really looking at how many resources you need to do the job?
To be honest, I don't want to be out there saying I'm going to speak for operators or the people who make those decisions, but just my observation, starting in the operational side of the business in National Express, and then understanding the constraints that train operating companies have, or other operators, is they provide a lean model. So you provide a model that delivers you provide an operational team who can deliver the quality that you're expected to achieve. They don't resource typically, because the budget isn't provided, because there's no buffer, an operational team who deals with the variance. So if you're managing during disruption, where are those extra people? Because one of them needs, let me think, you've got a, I'm going to use, you've got train service. You've got a train that has encountered disruption. You have to have resources stay on that train, because you cannot leave that train unattended. You then need to provide an additional service to keep those passengers moving. You need to have an interim group of people who help those passengers get to where they need to. Those people can't be a standing army, or aren't a standing army just waiting around for that to happen. Because on the days when things do go well, that's money that's not been well spent. On the day when disruption happens, that's money that's much needed. And it's that balance of being able to provide change management in a really efficient way. And I think it's less about having the bums on seats that need to respond to that. It's about being able to have the upfront strategy and the management layer that minimises that variance initially. Because what you're doing is actually, that question, Martin, was how do we fix the problem? What I'm trying to say is, how do we stop that problem happening? Because you've got controls in place that better manage that variance. So that might be a good place to stop. I don't know.
I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about the invisible work that happens within organizations. And one of the things I find quite interesting when we put these sort of controls in is the ability to recognize the invisible work that's happening. So we're talking about having the interim staff who help people onto a train, and that they're not particularly well used otherwise, but actually those interim staff build relationships with the local community when they're standing around there. And that's actually fundamental. So when your children are running late and the train, they know them and they let them through, or they look after them if they've come out and their parents aren't there. And there's all sorts of things that have happened there over the years where they've built an incredible relationship. And actually, when something goes wrong, because of the strength of the relationship of them with the local community, it means that it's a much smoother exercise. So I find it really interesting that completely agree that you need to take change management into it, but actually considering it with the human aspects that come with that becomes really important, that you don't accidentally efficient out these very fundamental things people are doing that seem inefficient, but actually create the heart and soul of our organizations.
I think it's having that, it's being able to maintain those key resources that are permanent within an organization. Because I actually just like a couple of qualifying points, and I know this will probably be knitted in when it's put together. So the reason why I introduced this topic was about the idea, because I would like client organisations to have this capability in-house. Now that capability needs to be able to be flexed. So the flexing bit is about how to get those resources in quickly or flexibly. Not necessarily, you obviously want a prompt response, but it's the flexibility of not having to have them as permanent headcount, but being able to flex them. There's different ways in which we can do that, can't they? By having associates, or you're being able to have partners that you bring in and you bring out, and you don't have to keep tendering. It's different relationships, and it's that flexibility there. I mentioned consultancy a couple of times, and I think that is important as well, because the role of consultants is key, because it allows that flex, it allows that scalability. But the key thing is the knowledge transfer. So the knowledge transfer to increase the capability of an organisation. A lot of organisations currently do not have that enterprise P3O capability. Do they know what it needs to look like? Probably, maybe, but they just don't have the money. Okay, how can we help them find the money through finding better innovation and value elsewhere? Okay, maybe it's not about money, it's about capability. Okay, let's provide that, and it's literally that one or two people to help that organisation build the capability from within. This is not talking about armies of people. It's not massive PMOs. It's the one or two people that can advise an organisation as to applying the right enterprise P3O model. So I'd say it's a cooperative, it's a skill share, it's a knowledge share, so that as an industry we can grow together. Just thinking there was one more thing that I thought was also useful, just about the why it's important to bring in new ideas, and that again doesn't have to be through consultants. It can be. Wouldn't it be really wonderful, and it probably happens already, I just don't know about it, that industry share knowledge with each other, that manufacturing share information with the railway and vice versa. You have a lot of cross-transport organisations, but when we're trying to identify performance improvement and you're trying to do it day in, day out, and you have Lean Six Sigma and you have continuous improvement, it's not unusual that you can go native and you start to limit your ideas because you're so embedded in the same process all of the time. So unless you go outside of your organisation, outside of your door and your home to think about how other people do things, you've only got a few ideas, haven't you? It's just nature. So I think that's really useful as well, is to get a mechanism of sharing ideas, which is why the scale and flex of a change organisation cannot be the same group of people all of the time. It's why exec boards, don't they? They switch out, 3 to 5 years. You'd need that influx of ideas. So again, not trying to kind of predict the work here in the consulting space. What I'm trying to advocate for is it would be trying to convince organisations that invest in change within your organisation. Don't wait for significant change to need to happen. Invest in it on a day-to-day basis. And if you need any help figuring out what that is, there's a really good community of people. However, that community is siloed, and I think we need to, in order to help our clients look at things in a system way, to look at things holistically and integrated, we need to integrate ourselves as a community and have more conversations where you've got change managers, project managers, data analysts, P3O people all in one space. So that's more of what we want on a Project Chatter and other wonderful podcasts like this.
Okay.
Can you? Yeah, good.
Yep, that's good. So we'll start to wrap up there now, and thanks a lot for your time. Are there any final thoughts? Are there anything you would like to leave our listeners with?
I think I've said enough, to be honest. I think the final thought. Well, Joe, are there any final questions that you have? Because the final thought I had was probably what I said just a moment ago, which is I'm going to say PPM. Project program management community, including our change and data specialists, that we have a role to play in helping show what an integrated enterprise offering is, because people can only buy what's there, can't they?
So I think one, grateful for the plug on the idea of the need to share knowledge. That's completely in my wheelhouse and what we do as a group. So yes, I completely and utterly buy into that concept. And I think for me, my final thoughts is sort of around the fact that I came on expecting to hear about sprints and scrums and all of the classic agile concepts, and I've been really pleased to have this much broader conversation, which really encompasses the idea of enterprise and of flexing between business as usual and managing that variance. So I found it deeply interesting, and thanks so much. I feel a lot more comfortable with this concept.
Oh, wonderful, good, and
Brilliant.
We'll stay in touch, Joe, Martin. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations in the future.
Brilliant, and we'll definitely invite you on for round 2. We'll bring back Joe as well. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for this episode, but please remember to help us pay it forward by sharing a link to this episode on your social media. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Ellen Mellington, and also a massive thank you to Joe for stepping into Dale and Val's small shoes, and thank you all for listening. So till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From Joe and I, it's goodbye.